The dollar is making another big move higher to the point that it's causing other central banks and governments to respond and even intervene against it, if only to keep their own currencies from crashing. Fears over the global economic downturn are driving monetary tightness and even demand for safe havens, especially against those currencies who are at the forefront of this downside. South Korea, for example, has watched its won get blasted recently over concerns that Asia in particular is and will continue to be the epicenter of the setback. And this comes after the government there had intervened 6 weeks ago and looks to be getting ready to do so yet again. And it got so bad, even the Bank of Korea, the country's central bank, shelved a rate cut earlier this week and put one in its next meeting in jeopardy, trying to avoid provoking more won losses. The new government next door in Japan, it's wrestling with very much related drop in the yen against the dollar, and for all the same reasons, where those in Tokyo are trying to figure out what they might do about the slide in their currency. And this is a crucial weekend for Argentina, where a massive US-led intervention against the stronger US dollar is already in very much doubt. India's central bank, it has put up huge numbers interfering in the market there. And on the flip side of everything, the safety side, the Swiss are believed to have stepped in because the euro isn't nearly as strong as Sell America sold everyone a couple of months ago. As Eurodollar tightens its hold over the rest of the world's currency exchanges, official sectors all over the place are being forced to try to respond. And many of them are just as surprised as the mainstream media after believing what the mainstream media was selling as far as a weak dollar future. It was the dollar that was supposed to be crashing, but instead, the Eurodollar is crashing everyone's plans for financial stability again. The best place to start to see this is in South Korea, where the Korean won continues to fall even after the South Korean government intervened in the foreign exchange markets a couple of weeks ago, a little bit over a month ago. It never works because this is the Eurodollar's world. Now, the won has slid to 14.38 to the dollar as of Friday, its lowest exchange rate since April. At the end of August, after that government intervention, and then South Korea's top central banker defended it, reportedly with the approval of Washington, KRW, the Korean won, had rebounded around 13.85. So over the nearly 2 months since then, the value has dropped roughly 4%. More importantly, once again, this shows how governments are essentially powerless against the Eurodollar. Like central bank policies, central government currency policies, and even their actions are nothing more than reactions to conditions in the Eurodollar's world. And it's mainly for show, to say to the public that officials are doing something about their weakening currency, trying to maintain the idea of stability, even when that's the last thing in the marketplace. In fact, just earlier today, the South Korean government made even more threats, pledging to take action to stabilize the FX market that could not possibly care less about the South Korean government's pledges, statements, or their interventions. Authorities will closely monitor international markets and will take timely action if needed, the Finance Ministry said in a mobile phone message Friday after Finance Minister Koo Young-chol met with Bank of Korea Governor Ri Chang-young and financial regulators. The ministry did not elaborate on the measures because they never do. They're left non-specific on purpose. Now, there are still worries about the final form of the tariff deal between the U.S. and South Korea, how much of an investment the Koreans will end up making, and ultimately whether the tariff rates on especially cars will be able to get down to 15% as had been initially agreed. But the economic fallout from any amount of tariffs might be a long-run problem that goes on top of the region's increasingly sluggish reality given China's summertime swoon. In fact, the won has gotten to be such a major problem that earlier this week, the Bank of Korea resisted going back into the Pringles can over it. The country's central bank instead opted to keep its policy rate at 2.5%, holding it at that level, which you might notice is when the weakening trend in the won really began to develop. Not just the won, but all around the world. That's when the dollar, the Eurodollar, started to drive the dollar exchange value higher. But not only that, Bank of Korea's Governor Ri stated that only 4 of the 6 policy members who set the rate policy were open to another rate cut over the next 3 months, which is one less than the last time, which means the Bank of Korea is actually sliding more toward the hawkish side. And Ri himself said that, quote, it reflects a greater focus on financial stability, which is just central bankers speak for, we don't want to add even more negatives to our currency. They believe, or they want the public to believe, that policy rates are a major, if not the main contributor to the behavior behind all of these currency values. The truth is, The Eurodollar directs currency values, and governments end up responding to them, both in the FX realm and with their own internal policies. And in this case, the Bank of Korea, which should otherwise be lowering its benchmark rates given the precarious state of the South Korean economy, it is forcing itself to stay out of the Pringles can just to maintain the currency stability theater. Before we go on with our video today, let me ask you a question. What if your gold could actually pay you every single month in more gold? That's what today's video sponsor, Monetary Metals, lets you do. And here's how it works. You still own the gold, it's still in your name, it's fully insured, but instead of just sitting there doing nothing, it actually starts working for you. Monetary Metals has built a system that turns idle gold into productive gold, earning real yield paid in physical gold, not dollars. No selling, no trading, no converting. You keep your gold, and every month you get more of it. It's a simple idea, but it solves a big problem. If gold is money, it should act like money, and now it finally can. If you're a long-term gold holder looking for a smarter way to store value, check them out at monetary-metals.com/Snyder. Again, that's monetary-metals.com/Snyder. I highly recommend booking a call with them today to see if they're the right fit for you. We thank Monetary Metals for their sponsorship, but now let's get back to the rest of our video. But one greater concern is what is taking place right now in China and its substantial weakness that's showing up this summer as that starts to ripple outward into the rest, first of Asia, especially China's closest trading partners like South Korea and Japan. More than any other reason or reasons, that's why the Eurodollar has set its sight on South Korea. The weakness in China, the weakness across Asia, it's not really about tariffs. It's about forgot how to grow and how forgetting in China is leading to bigger and bigger consequences. And the same goes for Japan and the yen. Now, the pathetic conditions in the Japanese economy have already claimed another prime minister. And remember, rate of change in the economy goes down enough, rate of change in politics goes way up. So we see political instability almost guaranteed to be economic instability on top of it. Now, while Japan has been able to avoid a technical recession at the start of this year with a rebound in GDP, it was only due to the artificial high of tariff distortions, which led to an export burst holding everything together. Household spending in Japan continues to be more subdued just in nominal terms recently, while in real terms, as you can see, it is just downright disastrously ugly. And it is that difference, which is not being corrected, that has Japanese voters on this constant rampage. See, that's the thing nobody admits. This isn't an inflation problem, it's an income problem, not just in Japan, but everywhere. Pandemic policies unleashed a supply shock, which then created the price illusion. It really is an illusion of a red-hot economy that led to inflation. Instead, it was a one-time shift in the price level way over and above incomes. And because incomes never caught up, people were impoverished. And in Japan, it may be the absolute clearest example of it. And you can easily understand why they're so pissed off. And it's the same way around the rest of the world. And on top of that, the Japanese have had to contend with food prices that have been utterly insane, especially rice. Not because of inflation, certainly not money printing or anything else that you hear. It's about more supply problems, and not recent ones either. In fact, as I talked about in a video not long ago, for Japan, it was a heat wave back in 2023. So Japan is already in rough shape. The economy has been in the doldrums, and yes, we've heard that before. But here in the 2020s, during the forgot how to grow dynamic, suffering an outright recession late in 2023, a false dawn in the back half of 2024 that is threatening to fall back into re-recession here in 2025. And when you put that together with household and consumer impoverishment due to price changes, it's really not a good situation. And then compound it by the extra threats to the export sector from U.S. tariffs potentially slowing down trade with America, or worse, as I just mentioned with South Korea, the dramatic slide that's taking shape right now in China. You've got bad internal dynamics in Japan combining with a pair of external negatives. No wonder the yen is sliding down to 153 to the dollar. The fact that Japan's yen is riding right alongside Korea's won right now is just more confirmation that neither government is going to be able to do much about either of them. But both of them are going to feel that they have to, because it is getting that serious. As I always say, the more officials feel that they have to do, the worse you know it must be. And Japanese officials have already started. As is standard practice in these cases, Tokyo sends somebody out to the media to make a statement that one-sided movements in the yen will be closely scrutinized. And earlier in October, that was Finance Minister Katsunobu Kato, who said the government was closely monitoring excessive fluctuations and disorderly movements. And the idea here is to warn, quote, speculators, they better not short too much of the yen, or else the heavy hand of the finance ministry is going to come in with billions of dollars and wreck their shorts. That's one reason why it never works, either the jawboning or the actual yen buying, dollar selling. Speculators are not the problem. The fundamental conditions and the outlook, those are the problem. It's just that in this case, like all the other cases, the fundamentals are not favorable to either the Japanese or South Korean governments, but they feel that they have to put on a big show anyway, even though in the end, what will be shown is just how powerless they are to stop the Eurodollar. Over in India, the rupee there has been dramatically lower since early July, and really going back to before then to May. Always a dependable Eurodollar canary, the rupee's plunge was a direct contradiction to basically every mainstream assumption, from the dollar crashing on Sell America to the global economy having survived trade wars relatively unscathed. The dollar was only temporarily pausing before its next deflationary push, which we can see around all of these currency exchange values and a whole bunch more. And then the rupee helpfully identifying that along the way, simply because the world's biggest problems aren't tariffs. They are impoverishment. They forgot how to grow, being further upset by tariffs. But with the rupee crashing to a record low just above 89 to the dollar in September, the Reserve Bank of India has been near constantly intervening, hoping to hold the currency exchange value around that level. In mid-October, officials went with their big guns approach, one that temporarily boosted the exchange rate back above 88, but more recent weakness has seen it slip back, and they're therefore constantly requiring even more RBI intervention. Like Japan and everywhere else, Indian officials have said they believe weakness in the currency is due to speculative attacks, which both justify and call for more and even constant interventions. However, the big action on the 15th, which was supposed to crush all those speculators by destroying their short positions and teaching them a lesson, didn't really work because it wasn't speculators. It has caused RBI to have to continuously come back into the market just to keep itself from being exposed. And the central bank has expended so many of its reserves on FX actions, it has removed a substantial amount of liquidity from India's own interbank system. That's because when RBI is selling dollars to try to weaken the dollar against the rupee, it is actually buying the rupees on the other side. And when the central bank buys those rupees, it removes them from the interbank system, effectively locking them away for more legitimate uses. And for what? RBI has been able to hold the exchange rate around 88, which is not a good level, and only for a couple of weeks. But that's no accomplishment, especially given the costs and increasingly internal disruption. Not to mention the fact that previous Reserve Bank of India regimes had managed to do the same thing in the short run, several short run periods, but not for intermediate and longer run gain. As it is, Malhotra, who's the current RBI governor, started his term last year pledging to stay out of all this FX business that had entangled his predecessor, Das. And instead, he ends up replicating all the same strategies because the Eurodollar conditions haven't changed, and those are what matter, not governments. Now, the last one I want to mention on this side of things anyway, because it's an important one, is the ongoing saga in Argentina. Now, I might have to do a full video on the peso and the situation there next week because there's national congressional elections this weekend that basically hold the entire Malay experiment and the entirety of Argentina's future in the balance. So no pressure on voting there. So if you want the background on everything, I did a video on it last month on September 22nd. Basically, though, the peso was doing okay, not great until the start of July. Yeah. The start of July, the Eurodollar deflation eruption that shows up against Canada, New Zealand, India, South Korea, and basically everywhere else. The Eurodollar synchronized tightening that also took hold of Argentina's peso. But when a key municipal election in Buenos Aires went decisively against Malay's party last month, the downside got even worse to the point that Malay himself had to go to D.C. trying to secure a U.S.-led rescue of the peso and really the Argentine financial, I don't know which one it is, the financial sector. But Argentina is the poster child in massive historic government-led and official-led failed interventions. Just ask the IMF. The fact that Washington opened a large swap line with Buenos Aires, but only a few days apiece, and then the American government was outright buying pesos, yet the currency plunged to a new record low this past Tuesday, and then Friday, despite more interventions, was still within a hair of setting a new one. So facing elections this weekend, the scaled-down hope is that Malay's party might be able to hold 1/3 of the seats, if only to be able to veto any attempts by the current opposition to significantly roll back Malay's badly needed reforms. But just like the previous reform efforts in 2017 into 2018, they ran into an angry Eurodollar that isn't just targeting Argentina. And so there is no patience, no margin for error for even the slightest little bit. So South Korea, Japan, India, Argentina, and a whole bunch more. And on the opposite side of those, the Swiss franc. Swiss officials have reportedly been intervening in their currency market too, but for the opposite reasons. With so much of the world getting hit by the Eurodollar, forcing those other currency rates lower, money has instead been flowing into safe havens like treasury assets, or until this week gold, but also Swiss assets and Swiss francs. With the euro weakening slightly against the dollar, the franc to euro exchange rate has gone way up, and the Swiss don't like that. As Bloomberg reported today, among peers in major developed nations, the franc is the best performer against the dollar over the past month. I love this part. Even though Switzerland's policy rate is at 0. It's emerged as a standout risk hedge in currencies, and its inverse correlation with global risk sentiment is near its strongest since May, and that is a warning for all of these things, up to and including the fact that governments and central bank policies don't matter nearly as much or at all like they tell you across the mainstream. We're supposed to be awed that the Swiss policy is at 0. The reason it's at 0 is because it's reacting to everything up to including why the franc is so strong. And the reason the franc is so strong is because of the Eurodollar, the same as the other side of the South Korean won or the Japanese yen or all these others in between. So the fact that the Swiss policy rate is at 0 and Swiss government bond yields are either next to 0 or for a huge chunk of the curve less than 0, it does not matter. Nor does the FX intervention trying to weaken the franc. So they'll keep telling you it's speculators when in fact it's the Eurodollar that's on the move, and all the rest of these governments are going to have to react to it, which is all they ever do. They respond to weakness, whether it be in their economy or their currencies, and usually those two things are really the same thing in this globally synchronized world, a globally synchronized Eurodollar world. Argentina, as I said, is really a good example of internal problems and their intersection with these external Eurodollar fundamentals and conditions. All the details in the video link below. As always, thank you very much for joining me. Huge thank you, Eurodollar University members and subscribers. And until next time, take care.